why.
What happened? I feel people down that hill.
Tonight, sleeping drivers and speeding truckers.
This guy's going so fast, we are flying right now trying to catch up.
And see what this trucker caught.
I'm telling you, I'm not safe to drive at the moment.
We don't have a choice on that. Are we clear on that?
A driver pressured to keep on trucking when he's almost asleep at the wheel. And think those guardrails are keeping you safe?
I've lost my legs in a wreck.
Tonight, exposing the controversial design change a company made. Did the loss of just 1 inch lead to the loss of limbs and lives?
This failed. This is a classic failure.
Pedal to the metal. Plus, a sniper on the loose during rush hour.
This is where he gets the gun ready.
Your life in your hands and his just by getting in your car.
Choosing who will live and who will die.
The frantic manhunt, but what they found couldn't have been more shocking. License to kill. Tonight, are you driving on a road to ruin?
Oh, damn!
Here's David Muir and Elizabeth Vargas.
Good evening on this Saturday, and as you head out this weekend with your family, perhaps running some errands, will you be driving down a road to ruin because of the trucks barreling past you, the speeding drivers, or drivers asleep at the wheel?
In fact, sleepy drivers are to blame for 1 out of every 5 car accidents, killing 7,500 people and seriously injuring 50,000 every year. We saw it in stunning video in a trial just weeks ago. A bus driver in Michigan nodding off and plowing into several cars. Here's Matt Gutman tonight on the case.
It's harrowing to watch. 8 camera angles recording this bus driver falling asleep, then awakening to a nightmare. But it's trucks, not buses, that we're chasing on this day. Out with the Ohio State Highway Patrol using air power to declare war on reckless truckers. At 3,500 feet above I-70 outside Columbus, Sergeant George King uses a stopwatch and white marks on the road to spot violators.
Following too close. It's going too fast. It looks like an oversized load.
King zeroes in on this 18-wheeler, barreling down the highway at 77 miles per hour and tailgating a car.
A real dark blue white box. Following too close, 0.34 seconds.
I'm now with the ground unit, and Sergeant Reimer jams his cruiser into gear.
This guy's going so fast, we are flying right now trying to catch up. You can see how fast we're passing these trucks.
The trucker pulls over. He's not happy.
I'm Matt from ABC News. How are you?
I don't need to be on the news.
They clocked you going 77 miles an hour and tailgating behind a car. You think it's hazardous?
Yeah. Just trying to catch up with semi-trailer up ahead.
The cops also nailed this trucker for tailgating.
We're going to issue the citation.
He's pulled over and cited.
Did you notice that you were too close to someone?
Well, sometimes you have to do that when you're passing another car.
Cracking down on potentially dangerous truckers is a top priority. In 2012 alone, there were more than 330,000 large truck crashes in the U.S., nearly 4,000 fatalities, and more than 100,000 injuries. In most cases, it's the truck driver who survives.
You have a truck that weighs 80,000 pounds. What happens when it collides with anything else?
It's catastrophic.
Looks like a bomb went off, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
It is a terrible accident. 2 vehicles and a Walmart truck.
It was this horrifying crash in June that turned the national spotlight on a leading cause of truck crashes: tired drivers. At 1 a.m. on the New Jersey Turnpike, a Walmart truck sped through a construction zone, going 20 miles over the limit and plowing into the back of 3 vehicles, including a limo bus carrying a group of comedians.
Comedian Tracy Morgan in critical condition right now.
Superstar comedian Tracy Morgan and 2 others were critically injured. Another comedian was killed in the crash. 62-year-old James McNair, a longtime friend and mentor to Morgan.
My dad was big on pictures. You can see it in that signature smile in almost every picture.
News of the crash ripped a hole in the lives of McNair's kids, Jamel and Danita.
It's hard to sometimes even, find the words.
The fact that he's not here anymore, I feel like I lost my best friend.
The family was shocked by what they learned about the Walmart driver, Kevin Roper, who has pleaded not guilty to charges related to the crash. Turns out that Roper had commuted over 700 miles from his home in Georgia to the Walmart facility in Delaware before he even punched in. Police say Roper had been awake for a full 24 hours when he slammed into Morgan's limo, allegedly fueled on a deadly combination of fatigue and velocity.
We want whoever's responsible for it to be held accountable for it.
The question the McNairs are now asking, did Walmart, the largest truck operator in the country, keep proper track of Roper's hours?
They have to make sure that their drivers are doing so in a responsible manner. And that means making sure your drivers are not driving in a way that they're dangerous.
Walmart says it is cooperating fully in the ongoing investigation, and that if it's determined that our truck caused the accident, Walmart will take full responsibility. In fact, just weeks ago, Walmart reached an out-of-court settlement with the McNair family, dollar amount unknown. Despite the huge toll caused by trucking accidents, the industry trade group maintains that safety is a top priority.
2/3 of accidents involving commercial vehicles are actually caused by a vehicle other than the commercial vehicle.
Driving a semi-tractor trailer like this, any small mistake, we can take a life.
Out here on the road, trucker Abe Atella says so many companies put unrelenting pressure on drivers to deliver loads on time.
There are other circumstances where companies and drivers will put money ahead of safety.
And Atella says he found that out firsthand on a frigid February night. The trucker with the spotless record was in the middle of a 400-mile run to Wisconsin hauling a load of tomatoes for his company K&B. All of a sudden, he says he notices himself drifting dangerously into a type of unconsciousness that truckers call microsleeping.
Basically, your eyes are open, your hands are on the wheel, but your brain shuts off for 3 to 5 seconds.
Atella says he was so worried he might cause an accident, he pulled into a truck stop and called the K&B dispatchers.
Hey man, we got a bit of a problem, dude. I'm starting to fall asleep going down the road here.
But get a load of this. The K&B dispatchers, instead of telling him to just get some rest, hot potato Abe from one dispatcher to another, each of them with the same advice.
Get some coffee and then because we don't have a choice on this. Get a cup of coffee, walk around the truck, do something.
I already did that earlier, man.
Now, the last dispatcher is relentless, even refusing to listen to Atella.
Let's get out and get some fresh air. What is it, about 10 degrees outside?
Yeah.
That'll wake you right up, right? I can get you all fired up. If you want me to make you angry, I can get you woke up that way.
He's not getting your goat.
No, I knew before I made the phone call I was not moving that truck anymore until I got some sleep. I'm telling you, I'm not safe to drive at the moment.
Okay, boy, then here's the deal. We don't have a choice on this. That's not how we work your game.
I say I'm not going to hurt anybody out here on the road.
You know what? You don't need to jump to that. That's dramatic that I don't need this morning, right?
You're being honest, and he's saying, oh, that's dramatic bullcrap. I don't need this.
I mean, it was very clear at that point that he just cared about that load and making that money.
But the dispatcher still isn't through. Listen as he now ups the ante, threatening to dock Atella's pay.
Wonder where your paycheck went this week? You know, it came down to where it went tonight. Are we clear on that?
Yes, we are clear.
Okay, I don't know if you have a wife at home and she's going to ask you, hey, what happened this week?
Finally, K&B agrees to send another driver to rescue the load of tomatoes so Atella can finally get some sleep.
So, when you wonder where your paycheck went this week?
And ultimately, the company didn't dock his pay. K&B refused to talk to us about how its dispatchers handled Atella's case, but we did get a very clear response from the head of the trucking lobby.
Well, the driver was obviously doing the right thing. And the dispatcher was obviously doing the wrong thing. There's just too much at stake when you have a commercial vehicle going down the nation's highways with a fatigued driver.
Atella decided to quit K&B. He's still driving a truck, hauling loads between the booming oil shale fields of western Pennsylvania. He now says he's proud of exposing one of the industry's biggest dangers and of keeping his record and conscience clean.
This is the side of trucking that people never see. You know, this is the kind of treatment that drivers have been putting up with for so long because we know that our jobs are on the line here.
Next, guardrails on the side of most highways. But are they truly guarding your safety in crashes?
It essentially was a spear
that came through my car.
Did a little-known design change cause people to lose their legs? A story we've been reporting for months. Tonight, all new developments when Road to Ruin returns.
We're going to turn now to those guardrails on highways across the country. They're supposed to help you survive a crash, but some say a little-known change to them severely injured, even killed their loved ones. It's an issue we've been reporting on for months here, but tonight, brand new developments. And here's Brian Ross, whose investigation helped put this on the national radar.
Just after midnight on Interstate 40 in North Carolina, where a guardrail meant to protect almost killed.
We need to get somebody out of here quick. I'm counting the bleeding. All right, sir, I'm trying to locate you.
The motorist hit the guardrail head-on after nodding off and was trapped in his car, bleeding out.
We're going to die. All right, we're trying to get some help.
The long steel rail, seen in this photo from behind the driver and passenger seats, sliced through the SUV like a thick, sharp spear and then cut off his legs.
I've lost my legs in a wreck. Are you saying you've lost both your legs, sir? Yeah.
36-year-old Jay Traylor did survive, able to save his life with a makeshift tourniquet, but not his legs.
In the wreck, this one was gone. Then I had to make the choice to lose that one, too.
It wasn't supposed to happen. This test film from 15 years ago shows how a guardrail is supposed to absorb the impact, even in a head-on crash at 62 miles per hour. The truck hits what's called the end terminal, which, like a sled on a rail, moves along the guardrail, absorbing the impact and deflecting and spewing the rail off to the side. That's not what happened with Jay Traylor.
Had the guardrails done their job, I probably would have walked away just going, damn, I'm an idiot.
Traylor and a growing number of accident victims across the country are suing the company that makes the guardrails, Trinity Industries of Texas. Among the allegations, as laid out by one of the lawyers in the case, Stephen Lawrence, that the company tried to save a few dollars by quietly making some slight changes.
That's not all they changed.
In the design of what's called the Trinity ET+.
This is the original 5-inch ET+, and this is the modified 4-inch ET+.
And that 1 inch you're saying makes a significant difference.
It makes all the difference in the world.
This animation shows what lawyers suing Trinity say happens with the original, gliding along the rail and diverting it to the side, and what they say can happen with the modified version. The thinner terminal jams up, breaks off, and the rail drives through the vehicle.
The impact is the guardrail does not have the room to expand like it needs to save your life.
31-year-old Rebecca Dreyer, a single mom from Pennsylvania, says she too was a victim of the change in the guardrail design, which pierced her car and cut off her right leg.
I didn't understand exactly what had happened because I didn't realize that it essentially was a spear that came through my car.
Rebecca, among those now suing Trinity, became angry and upset as she looked at the photos from her accident, the first time she had seen them.
I very well could have not walked away from that. Wow. That's me?
By government estimates, there are some 200,000 of the redesigned guardrail end terminals on highways across the country, found in almost every state.
This failed. This is a classic failure.
But Trinity never told the Federal Highway Administration about the changes until this man came along, Josh Harmon, the owner of a small, competing guardrail company, who became entangled in a patent lawsuit with Trinity and had access to internal documents.
You looked at the highway specs submitted to the federal government?
Yes, sir.
Were they in there?
No, sir. No, none of this was disclosed. Absolutely none of this.
Trinity officials call Harmon a liar and an opportunist, out to make a buck by bringing yet another lawsuit against the company. But he says he's out to prove a rash of accidents are tied to the guardrail changes kept secret from the government.
They call you a sleazy operator.
No, I'm sure they do. If I'm crazy, it's irrelevant. It's killing people. That's the most important thing here. What I am has no bearing whatsoever. The fact that I found it, let's address that.
The company says the changes Harmon is talking about were inadvertently omitted when it submitted documents to the Federal Highway Administration. But an internal company email obtained by ABC News shows Trinity engineers actually discussed keeping the change secret. Quote, I'm feeling that we could make this change with no announcement, unquote.
So even that 1-inch change should have been reported to the Federal Highway Administration?
Absolutely. You have to ask your question, why would you change it? What's the motivation for changing the 1-inch?
Harbin says it's all about the bottom line, trying to increase profits at Trinity, something the company denies. But according to the same internal Trinity email, the engineers calculated that shaving off an inch would save about $2 for each end terminal. That's $50,000 a year and $250,000 in 5 years by using the 4-inch channel, the memo reads.
That's one of the motivations. The other motivation is reusability. And these changes, no question, ruin the terminal where it's not reusable. And
So
that means millions to them.
If you have an accident, the Highway Department has to buy a new one.
You have to buy a new one.
And Harmon scored a huge victory late last year when a federal jury in Texas found in his favor, agreeing that Trinity defrauded the U.S. government when it failed to disclose those modifications.
Mr. Mitchell, Brian Ross from ABC News.
The company was ordered to pay $175 million, an amount that could be tripled. The company president, Greg Mitchell, left the courthouse refusing to comment.
Nothing at all?
But Trinity says it will appeal the verdict. In the wake of the verdict, the number of states which suspended the use of the Trinity guardrail system rose to 42. And questions were raised in Congress about whether the Federal Highway Administration had been too lenient with Trinity.
But I'd like a commitment from you, Mr. Secretary, that you will work with us on eliminating the all-too-cozy relationship, frankly, that exists right now between the Federal Highway Administration and this manufacturer.
Despite the gruesome accidents, the government had ruled the guardrail system met all federal safety standards.
Mr. Artemovich, Brian Ross from ABC News.
This is the official who made that decision, Nick Artemovich, who had declined to talk with us until we showed up at an industry conference last year.
Why did you make that decision?
Based on the evidence that was presented to us.
And you think they're safe now on the highways?
As I said, please talk to Office of Public Affairs.
You can't answer that question?
No, sir.
Whether they're safe?
Safety is a relative matter.
Artemovich is the same official who once expressed concern that it is hard to ignore the fatal results. But after Trinity officials asked for what they called an intimate meeting with him, Artemovich decided there was no problem with the new guardrail terminals.
We did meet with Trinity.
Right. And you feel they're safe?
They have met the crash testing as required.
And what about the fatal accidents that you've been talking about?
I'd really ask you to...
Can you explain those?
Public Affairs.
All the attention and the verdict in Texas led the Federal Highway Administration to order a new set of safety crash tests for the guardrail heads. Just this week, the government said the Trinity system passed all 8 of its tests, even though the 8th and final test appeared to show much more damage to the vehicle than any of the others.
There is no way this device can be considered to have passed.
Senator Richard Blumenthal says he believes the testing itself was flawed.
The fact of the matter is that the testing of this device, authorized by the Federal Highway Administration, has been a sham.
Trinity says the results vindicate its position that the guardrail system has been and continues to be safe on American roads. But federal officials say, even with the new test results, they will continue to investigate what has happened in real-world situations, like what happened to Rebecca Dreyer, still dealing with the loss of her leg from a guardrail accident.
They know what's wrong with them. Change the heads back to the ones that were safe, that weren't failing, that weren't having these problems. Because how many more people do you want to lose limbs and go through all of this?
Next, cars wiped out, playing chicken with speeding trains. Their close calls and crashes posted online. But what about the trains they never saw coming because their signals and warnings were obscured?
How can you see a train? You can't.
Killer crossings when we come back.
We're going to turn now to what can sometimes be another danger on America's roadways, train crossings. A month ago, a commuter train here in New York crashed into a stalled SUV on the tracks and killed 6 people. So Deborah Roberts is here tonight with one family story that will have us all thinking about the next time we cross the tracks.
Admit it. You've probably thought about it, maybe even done it. Despite the clanging bells and those gates intended as barriers, an inner speed demon can take over. Rushing, scrambling, dodging, all with one reckless idea: beating the oncoming train.
Most common thing I see that they hesitate, they don't want to wait, they go around the gates.
Alan Smith has seen it all. A fanatic for trains, he posts some of those daredevils on his YouTube site, Millennium Force.
Now that's a...
All too often, the fast and the curious end up like this.
Damn.
Though these drivers survive, the videos all over the internet paint a dark picture. When a train hits a car, it's like a car hitting a soda can. And it happened again this week.
Oh my God!
The third major collision in the U.S. in just 6 weeks, when an Amtrak train in North Carolina spliced a tractor-trailer stuck on the tracks. Incredibly, no one was killed. Government statistics say trains collided with vehicles more than 2,000 times last year. More than 260 killed, another 800 injured, many involving freight trains.
Oh, damn!
Check out this car chase in Utah.
She's gonna hit a train.
Police couldn't stop this woman, but 8,000 tons of train did.
The train hit her.
Twice. Down in Houston, this daring driver makes a last-ditch attempt to cross. And in Florida, this frantic conductor does his best to stop, to no avail. The driver got out just in time.
Your heart starts beating as the engineer throws the train into emergency, and you just know there's going to be a collision. And you sit there wondering, why didn't you pay attention to the gates?
It's an obvious question, but before you lay the blame on clueless drivers, hit the brakes. Just ask Betsy Duvall.
Rear is just full of train tracks, just full of them.
Still haunted by her accident. Though you'd never miss these tracks during daylight, at night, here's what Betsy saw. Lost and confused, she got stuck on a crossing in rural South Carolina. No idea that a train was barreling down on her. With only seconds to flee, she froze.
When I realized that there was just no way my car was going to make it off those tracks, I think I panicked and went into shock.
Betsy was gripped by what's called the freeze response, a natural reaction where a person under duress is literally paralyzed by fear. Thankfully, a nearby police officer jumped into action.
Ma'am, come on, get back. Come on, get back.
He said, well, you need to get out now because there's no time. A train is on its way. All I could do was just turn and watch it hit my car and just shove it down the tracks. Just to think that in an instant my life could have been just taken without any warning.
And here in Tempe, Arizona, a train had just passed when Brandon Stovall started to drive across the tracks. He didn't see the second train coming.
It's just like if somebody were to walk next to your car and hit you with a baseball bat in the head.
He was cited for crossing before the arm was fully raised. But the real issue?
There was a sensor on the track that stopped working, which allowed the arms to raise up when a train was coming through the intersection and it should have been down.
A deadly yet common complaint. Gates should work like clockwork and stay down when trains are approaching. But Stovall has proof that doesn't always happen. Take a look at this video he shot 2 weeks later. Gates down, the train passes. But as soon as the gate raises again, get this, another train. Malfunctioning signals are one thing, but in other places, they're out of commission.
They've installed a set of gates and lights, but there's bags on top of the lights.
New lights that aren't activated?
And it's
unbelievable to Vicki and Denny Moore, who are determined to blow the whistle on faulty train crossings.
As you can see, you've got all this vegetation, all these trees blocking a driver's view. And you're not required to stop at this crossing. The only time
because it only says yield.
And our contention has always been, how can you yield to something that you can't see?
Which is exactly what happened to Vicki Moore's 17-year-old son Ryan, killed at this crossing, the second such death that month. The Moores were awarded $5 million from the train company, which later put up these barriers and new signals. When you look at these tracks and you look at it today, it looks perfectly safe.
I get angry. I get angry when I come here now and I see these gates.
Why?
Because had there been gates there the day that our kids came down that hill, the accident would never have happened.
Their millions went to a foundation, Angels on Track, which hopes to prevent other devastating train collisions. An uphill battle, given that only 35% of crossings have flashing lights and gates, according to the government. I would think it's to the railroad company's advantage to have these things. I think they want these at every crossing.
Well, what they're thinking is they have to handle all maintenance on the gates, on the signal systems. They're making less money.
So are you saying the railroad companies would probably just as soon not have to have all of this?
Correct.
The railroads share ownership for every crossing in this country. Why aren't they sharing responsibility for making sure that all these crossings are safe and protected with gates?
A tangled web of bureaucracy that infuriates the Moors. So when there's a problem, who's to blame? The rail lines or the government? You may not like what this government-funded safety advocate has to say.
At every crossing, there's a blue and white sign, and it has a 1-800 number on it.
But if that gate malfunctioned and you were the one driving, it's kind of a little late to make a call.
No, it isn't. Get away from the car and then find a way to contact the railroad or your local police.
If you make it.
Yes, if you make it.
Ultimately, your safety is up to you. So drive carefully and look both ways so you don't end up like this.
Next, the town that dreaded their commute home. Because that's when a sniper was picking off cars and drivers.
There was no pattern to the victims.
So how do you get inside the mind of a madman? To catch him when Road to Ruin continues. "2020 continues with Road to Ruin.
When you're on the highway, it's likely the last thing you're really thinking about is whether someone is targeting your car with a gun, looking to do you harm. Entire cities' communities have been terrorized by this. And tonight here, the newest case, a sniper using a highway for target practice. Here's Jim Avila.
Beneath the bright lights of Kansas City, a different kind of neon is about to scare drivers in this large Midwestern city off the streets. It's March of last year, and a green Dodge like this one is gearing up for 3 weeks of mayhem. The car is headed for the highway, and that's bad news for anyone in its way. Because someone is driving around Kansas City who thinks he's got a license to kill.
Drivers on edge tonight after gunfire on 2 metro highways.
8:30 on a Wednesday evening, and a car is headed down Interstate 70, the Heartland's central east-west artery. The driver hears 2 loud pops and doesn't think much of it until blood starts gushing from his leg.
Then 10 short minutes later, it happened again.
When it happens again, it's 37-year-old salesman Tom McFarland who's under attack.
And I hear, what sounds like would be a rock hit the car.
His Ford Fusion struck on the passenger side with the bullets lodging in the metal.
I guess I don't necessarily want to say shock, but just over time it definitely hits you. Someone shot a bullet at me as I'm driving down the road.
And the bullets keep flying.
The investigation into that terrifying rash of highway shootings around Kansas City. Police now saying the number of cars shot is at least up to 20.
As motorists are peppered with gunfire, the nation takes notice, and the locals take cover.
I'm driving around this town all the time. My family is, my kids, my grandkids. They got to stop these folks.
Now I'm just really mad. Who just drives by somebody and just shoots at their car?
People were very afraid because these shootings were happening on suburban highways during rush hour.
As the former crime reporter for the Kansas City Star, Christine Vendel says this story changed driving patterns and perceptions.
People started altering their behavior and avoiding highways.
These were not targeted shootings, right?
Right. That heightened the fear factor, the randomness. There was no pattern to the victims. They were different vehicles, different genders of victims, different ages.
With a city in panic, and a police force baffled, speculation rules the day.
Did detectives feel the pressure?
In this case, it's so lacking initially with information, I think, that it would become very frustrating.
Criminologist John Hamilton knows from what he speaks. He spent 27 years with the Kansas City Police Department. He says job one is to find a pattern.
Commonalities of victims, locations, anything where you might be able to see where there is something that you can kind of home in on.
I don't travel this road very often.
That pattern started to emerge with cases like Jenny Bowers. Just like Tom, she heard that telltale noise.
It sounded like a giant rock. The bullet dislodged and rolled down into the door panel.
Like the other victims, this mother of two did not see the shooter, but some eyewitnesses say they saw a green Dodge Neon lurking in the next lane.
Police described the behavior as pacing, like he would pace and loiter in their blind spots so he could see them and get his plan together.
That's when he's made his decision. This is where he gets the gun ready.
And after the shots are fired, the gunman uses a low-tech but ingenious getaway plan.
In many cases, there was also near an exit ramp, right?
Yes, a couple of victims said, I was committed to the ramp. And so I can't very well slow down and maybe chase you because I'm committed to the ramp.
That's how the next pattern emerges.
Well, most of these cases did occur in a pretty similar geographic area. In Kansas City, it used to be called the Grandview Triangle.
The Grandview Triangle, a twisted pretzel of a roadway with on-ramps and exits galore. A perfect spot for the shooter to play his deadly game. And now the city is on the edge of panic.
There was a lot of fear. I mean, there was people that they wouldn't go through the Grandview Triangle. They would take alternate routes.
When you find out that it was not isolated, that may have been part of a pattern, what is that like?
Then it was a little scarier, because I remember the days of the DC Sniper.
Could this be a copycat of the DC Sniper? That was a team who terrorized the Capitol Beltway for 3 weeks back in 2002. Shooting from the trunk of a Chevy customized to kill. Everyone's got questions now, and no one has answers. With 3 drivers wounded and potential targets everywhere, the feds are called in to join the hunt.
Well, we had talked to some experts who had speculated that the gunman would end up being a lone male in his 20s.
When we return, inside the mind of the highway shooter, a twisted road for sure, and where it leads will shock everyone.
We continue with 2020. Once again, Jim Avila and the Kansas City Sniper.
The reward is up, and so are the number of cases being linked to the roadway shootings investigation.
As the mystery of the Kansas City highway shooter deepens, the city's motorists are looking over their shoulders.
We've tried to avoid the triangle. It's been actually really nerve-wracking.
The shooter is still on the loose, and why he is terrorizing this quiet city remains a mystery.
Oftentimes offenders will do some of these kinds of things for a sense of power. These people fear me, but they don't know me. Until they stop me, I'll continue to do this.
And they get a thrill over it by driving around and choosing who will live and who will die.
While cops are making some progress, they decide to deputize an entire community and ask for the public's help.
Anyone with information is asked to call the TIPS hotline.
The reward money is up to 10 grand, and apparently money does talk. The tips start pouring in. Witnesses paint a creepy, mysterious description of the shooter.
The shooter was described as wearing a black hoodie, a gray hoodie, cloth covering his face, and a ski mask at times.
A woman calls in saying she saw that green Dodge, and she adds a crucial detail.
She was able to get a full license plate number, and that was a huge break in the case.
To have something like that, just come in out of the blue, I can imagine there's joy in the squad room.
Police run down that license number, Illinois plate G865203. It comes back to an Edward Whitaker of Illinois, a divorced father of 4, who claims he recently paid for the plates for a white Buick he gave to his son. That's confusing to cops who are searching for a green Neon. Nevertheless, they finally have a name. So who is this masked man? Cops say he's 27-year-old Mohammed Whitaker. This is his profile picture on Facebook. Cell phone in one hand, energy drink in the other. But could he also be carrying a .38?
His high school classmates didn't notice anything unusual. They said he was friendly, laid back, and decent was the word that was repeatedly used to describe him.
People have known him throughout his life, have good things to say about him.
As the profilers predicted, the suspect is a male in his 20s, but he has no violent criminal past. He has a job doing medical billing and collections. According to family members, he's never even fired a gun, much less owned one.
Normal kid, no problems. Just like all kids, he wanted a car and his daddy bought him a car.
But this normal kid is proving to be a bit of a chameleon. He likes to be called Pedro. He signed up for cell phone service using the name Momo. And by the time the cops come up with Mohammed Whitaker's address, he's already moved out. Yes, Dodge seems to be taking on a whole new meaning as Whitaker continues to elude police. But authorities now realize they'll find their man when they can find that car.
When they got that license plate from the witness from the erratic driver, they plugged it into the system and were able to get a match in several different areas of the city that eventually led them to Mohammed Whitaker's residences.
So they go high-tech, a license plate reader which uses cameras mounted on a patrol car to scan every single license plate it passes. The license plate reader can also be used to go back in time. Every time a plate has been captured, the data is stored. License plate G865203 had been picked up by police about 8 months earlier on a street where Whitaker used to live.
Then when they were able to drive by, they did see that that plate was on another type of car.
Once on a white Buick, a week earlier on a silver Chevy, and now the discovery that breaks the case. The plate is on a third car, and bingo, it's a green Dodge Neon. The suspicious plate is being moved from car to car. And there's another disturbing detail.
The district officers who worked that area remembered a shooting about 6 months prior, and they remembered that the trajectory of the bullet that ended up in a neighbor's house came from the area of the home where Mohammed had lived.
The .380 caliber bullet from that crime matched 11 bullets recovered from victims of the highway shooting. And more bullets turn up. A motorcyclist who dropped the cell phone is searching for it along a roadway. He kicks a Walmart bag and uncovers empty ammo boxes and some spent shell casings.
They find a fingerprint on the bag that matches Mohammed Whitaker.
Cops finally do locate Whitaker, but they stay in surveillance mode, and the suspect's next destination, the parking lot of a Bass Pro Shop to meet a private gun dealer. Police say he was out to improve his aim.
While the police were watching him, they saw him trying to buy apparently some better weaponry with a laser sight.
Police then watch as he allegedly stalks potential motorists, and then, suddenly, he crosses 3 lanes of traffic and nearly runs someone off the road.
They did see him engaging in increasingly brazen behavior, and that's why it got to the point where I don't think they were ready to arrest him, but they felt like they had to.
And in the end, there is no struggle, no shootout.
That suspected gunman who terrorized drivers on the highway for weeks is now in custody.
Today, Mohammed Whitaker is charged as a criminal defendant in 18 felony charges.
Well, just from looking at him the first time we all saw him, he seemed very humble and confused and just cast his eyes downward.
Whitaker denies all charges and in fact says he too was a victim of the Kansas City highway shooter. Inside his home, cops say they find drawers holding live rounds of ammo like these, a .380 caliber handgun similar to this one, and in a closet, sunglasses and black hoodies. What remains a mystery is why the shooter went ballistic in the first place. A mystery that might be resolved only when Whitaker goes on trial. That's scheduled for October.
No, I was lucky. I didn't get hit.
For Tom McFarland and the others, a sense of relief. They're no longer moving targets, and a sense of pride in the community, which demonstrated grace under fire to help nab the so-called Kansas City highway shooter.